Good.
I guess that's what I have to say.
Thank you for your comments today, Steve.
You guys have a good rest of the meeting.
All right, very good. Next item on the agenda is Coast Guard project number 01-25-015, which calls for termination of buoys. What's the geographical area? The entire East Coast?
Well, District 1, if I'm not mistaken, it's New England.
Yes, right.
New England
District
waters.
1, New England.
Does that include New York or at least District 2?
I think they're District 2, actually.
I
think it's-
honestly have no idea.
I think it's from Connecticut East,
I
right?
can see the
Never let
interact,
New York
I can
into
look
New
at the
England.
interactive map. I can pull it up at least. I can pull the map up.
Yeah.
So we have it.
I glanced at that earlier this morning.
Okay.
Didn't pay a lot of attention to it.
So this project calls for termination of 3 buoys in our neighborhood here in Camden Harbor. And those include, this is such fine print here. I think CH13 is the northern one. And G1 at the northeast channel, and Red Nun number 2 are the 3 on the list to be eliminated. The committee members have any comments they want to share about this proposal?
In general, I think there is and I'm not just talking about these 3 buoys, in general, the idea that everyone uses GPS or whatever to navigate with is bullshit. Older boats, smaller boats do not have electronic navigation on board, and I use buoys all the time. It may not be drawing 33 feet, it might be drawing 4 feet, but I use it all the time to navigate, to recognize rocks and stuff on a bright, clear day. So the idea that everyone is sitting there in their motorboats on a GPS so we don't need navigational aids is a complete fallacy.
It's sort of like driving a car based upon the screen that they not all now have.
Yeah, one of the other things was downloading an app if you don't have GPS. Well, you know, we don't have
I've got one
we
of
don't
those.
have cell phone service, you know.
I have one on my phone, and on a sunny day, pretty hard to read. Plus, that means you're navigating
You're sitting,
like
why
this.
be on a boat if you're going to sit on in front of yours? Anyway,
It's
but
just totally, it's
well,
bogus.
yeah, I mean, when you go, you know, when we take our folks out to Seal Island, I mean, there's no cell service out there, and people coming from who have different cell phone providers. I mean, they come here, I can't get a signal.
It's a
So-
regulation made by people who don't actually do the
Right,
thing,
right.
are not actually on the water. Just to characterize people without knowing them.
A comment I have is that communications networks can fail,
Mhm.
and onboard electronics can fail. And I think it's good to sustain these markers. Liz, I have a statement from the Coast Guard here, underlined in red there at the top, and I forgot my glasses. And
Oh.
the print is so fine I can't read it. And what I believe I've marked there is their justification.
The
for
effort
doing
will
this.
result in the most sustainable navigation risk reduction to support and complement modern mariners. Today's much larger ships, ECS system availability and requirements, and powerful smartphone navigation subscription apps affordably accessible to virtually all waterway users. It's intended to support the navigational needs of the 21st century prudent mariner, vice mid 20th century pre-GPS, provide resilience against discrepancies. Let's see. I'm not sure. Yeah, that's about it. I mean, I would say we have some pretty young mariners out in the harbor learning to sail without smartphones as well. I mean,
Okay.
I have a smartphone, but having the navigation
I mean,
program on that.
my daughter has a little skiff that, you know, she doesn't have a smartphone. Nor is she getting one.
Today, our guests are David and Adam from the Penn Bay Pilots. And I wonder if you can share some comments.
Mind if I start?
Go ahead.
So far, everything everyone has said, including the harbor masters, is 100% correct. And those are all points that ought to be conveyed, whether you do it individually or as a group. And Steve hit on something that's bothered me about this whole process, and that is, you know, I've disagreed with Adam on this a little bit. Adam's already gone through and looked at each individual buoy and decided, you know, which ones we could live without. And I'm just washing my hands of it and saying none of this should happen until there's a discussion. And just like Steve sat here and said, well, you know, I use this buoy, maybe this one not so much. That's the type of conversation that should have been happening in harbor committees and with groups of mariners all around the coast with the Coast Guard before anything like this happened. Normally, the Coast Guard engages in these exercises called WAMS studies, Waterways Analysis Management Studies. And they go through them every so often, and they'll reach out, and part of a WAMS study will be a look at how can we modify the aids to navigation, or what aids can we replace or permanently remove or change with a virtual aid, and there's a discussion about things. There's outreach to the industry. I can't, unless I'm missing the boat, literally. I don't remember the Coast Guard ever coming to us or printing anything in the local notices or saying, we're proposing the removal of all of these aids. What do you think? Or let's have a meeting. There's going to be a meeting at the SEM set or up at the Hutchins Center or something that would, I mean, you could fill the Hutchins Center talking to people about this, all right? There was none of that effort. It's just like, this is coming. Deal with it.
Do you know if this started before Election Day or after?
I don't know, and I've been very careful to not try to read
No, I don't want to
anything.
politicize, but I'd just be curious.
I don't know.
If it's been in process for a year, that's different.
The feedback that we got from some people at a recent Coast Guard meeting was that this started in the previous administration. That was just, there was some talk about that. But as far as a formal process, a formal directive, a formal objective stated, I don't know when that started. I don't know who started it. But again, there clearly hasn't been any public input on this. There's been no industry input on this. There's been, you know, they haven't reached out to harbor committees or the pilots or yacht clubs or anything. It was just literally coming down the pike. Here's the directive, deal with it. These are going to be gone. So, you know, I've got a lot of bullet points. Everything that you've all said about, you know, the lack of cell phone service or staring at the screen or the battery dying, all of those things just jump right out. The statement that you just read, that we've all read, I find to be almost cynical. I mean, it's almost like they're mocking a system that's worked for a couple hundred years. It's almost like they're mocking it. Oh, you know, 18th and 19th century mariners, and we're going to, it's like the reason that they've been there for so long is because they work. So why are you getting rid of a system that works unequivocally? All the mariners know, we're trained about it. It's contrary to everything the Coast Guard's ever taught mariners in terms of not relying on one form of aid to navigation. You're always told to verify with another means of navigation, right? You don't trust any one thing 100%. That's why when you're barreling out of the fog or even going slowly through the fog, even though your chart plotter says you're in really great water, you get a sense of relief when you see close aboard on your port side, just where it's supposed to be, that buoy that you were expecting. So that level of confirmation of you know, navigation is going to be completely gone. There's technical limits to this equipment. We use it. I mean, look, we are big users of electronic navigation. big users of it. All right. The ships that we're on don't even have paper charts anymore. Okay. But still, even with that, there are limitations to what that equipment can do, and the peace of mind and added safety of knowing that you're in the safe water because of confirmation by looking out where a buoy is irreplaceable. Some of these electronic charts, I don't know if anybody's experienced this on their own boats, but there's this feature, Scammon. I don't know what Scammon stands for, but it's a scale feature. But when you zoom in or zoom out, the chart decides, well, that information doesn't fit on this particular screen. We don't have the pixels to show that. So it drops that off. I've looked for things on the chart on a certain scale. It's like, where the heck is that? Can't find it until I zoom in or zoom out, and you get to the right scale. And that's the machine telling you what.
It's this right here.
Yeah, that's
So
just.
you can see that.
Owl's
Like
head.
wipes out Rockland Harbor.
Owl's head.
It's like, okay.
No light, no aids, nothing.
And it's like, okay, well, I was just here. It's because it's the computer's telling you what it wants,
Yeah.
not what you want.
And so there's all the reasons, all of those reasons. And then the one that we are concerned about is what we find very troubling. You know, we worked over 20 years ago with the Port Safety Forum to get the Coast Guard to create the recommended route on Penobscot Bay. That's something that the Penobscot Bay pilots initiated through the Maine and New Hampshire Port Safety Forum. And that route is basically, for lack of a better term, the signposts of that route are the Morse Alpha buoys, the mid-channel deep water buoys, the red and white buoys, the Morse Alpha flashing white light on the top, MP buoy, TBI buoy, PA buoy, PB buoy, II buoy. Those are the buoys that mark the path that the ships take from Searsport either out to Monhegan or to the east to Matinicus. And those are the aids that we reference when we give security calls. And you're all mariners here. You've all heard us out on the water giving the security calls when we're moving ships up and down the bay. We reference those buoys. We don't have a vessel traffic service, but we do have enough commercial traffic on Penobscot Bay where recreational boaters should still be, and fishing vessels should be aware or would like to be aware of the movement of those commercial vessels. So those buoys, those are our signposts, our mile markers, and that's what we reference on our security calls. If you take those away, you're basically gutting the semblance of a vessel traffic service that we have, that we
Are they talking about taking those away?
all of them.
There's
Every
this-
single one.
This map is all, I mean, that's like,
Right, but I find it stunning that they are taking those away.
So, and I think it's because what you said, whoever came up with this idea has probably never spent a day on the water on Penobscot Bay. That's my assumption.
It's the same person that designed for
Or anywhere else, anywhere that they're talking about.
yeah, it
So,
goes all the way down to
yeah,
mid-New
those,
Jersey there.
those are, I mean, for us, they're critically important buoys. And even though they mark safe water, not a hazard, you know, we're talking about most buoys marking a hazard, those mark safe water. But when you're drawing 39 feet, you want that safe
But
water.
actually,
One's a-
they mark dangerous water for me because I don't
That's-
take my 19-foot Mako from North Haven over
That's
in the fog because I don't want to be collateral damage to a big ship going up the bay.
which is why when we give security calls, we say where we're at and where we're going. So you'll know if that ship is northbound or southbound, and you'll know he
Don't
might,
go for an hour.
that's that sort of thing. All right. Now we can get by with other geographic references, and we do use other geographic references once in a while, but having those Morse Alpha buoys as part of our security call protocol, I think, I mean, I don't even know how we would pin a value on that. It's been so effective, so useful. Like you're going to have,
Comparing a stoplight in the middle of the
Right.
road, yeah.
right. You know, it's like, you don't know how valuable it was until you take it out and the accidents pile up. Right. So that's a big one for us. So I'm working on this with my partners. We have not submitted something formally yet, although some of the pilots have sent in comments individually. But my preference is to write a letter to the Coast Guard and, more importantly, to the congressional delegation saying, stop this entire thing. Don't start picking winners and losers on the buoys until you've gone through the process and talked to the local maritime community and found out exactly why they value these aids and which ones they feel like are not necessary or could be done without. But stop that process because
Jared Golden sits on the committee that oversees Coast Guard operations. So
And-
if there's a letter to be written, he would probably be one of them. And Susan Collins, I believe, is on the Armed Forces. So she would be one
And
also.
she's
I write
a
up to them all.
Oh,
And
both King and Collins.
But Jared Golden sits on the committee that's Homeland Security, which is oversees the Coast Guard.
Well, the one navigational problem that's added a buoy recently is the ledge off North Haven,
Drunkard?
the Drunkard, which had a spindle, which, and then they said, oh, everyone knows where it is. We don't need it, except John Emerson got pissed off and got cranked up. And then, of course, you got Shelley Pingree out there and you got Janet Mills going out in the summer. And there's now a can marking the Drunkard. So at the same time they're taking all these away, that one's added because I'm sure there was muscle behind it.
well, that brings up a really important point that I've shared with the groups that I've been speaking with about this, and that is, by all means, you have to write the Coast Guard because they're going to compile the letters, and it may be that sort of a thing, Ron, or maybe that's why they're doing it. You know, they want to accumulate a big database of letters saying, "See, it's a bad idea." So the Coast Guard has to be addressed, but really, where the attention and the focus on this needs to be is with the congressional delegation, because I'm absolutely sure that at the end of the day, this has a lot to do with the Coast Guard finances. Buoys are expensive to maintain. They are dealing with limited resources. Over the years, they've taken away some of the very deep water offshore buoys that were used for ships to approach Penobscot Bay. There was one, the 14M buoy off Monhegan. That buoy was in, I think, 380 feet of water. And the Coast Guard, they tried to remove it for years. We write to our congressional delegation and say that's where the ships arrive and the pilots use that, and we get it kicked down the road. And then finally, about 8 or 10 years ago, they called us like, don't write to the congressional thing. It's gone. It's going to be gone. It is. It's the buoys that they have to put in the deep water, the size of the sinker, the size of the chain, the buoy itself. They've got, I think, 3 different classifications of weights, and it's the highest one. Those are very expensive. So those aids are going to be gone, and they've replaced those with virtual aids. They're AIS aids to navigation. They show up on your chart as a buoy, and they'll show up on your electronics as a buoy, but there's nothing there. It's an electronic signal. And for offshore waters, offshore, even perhaps offshore hazards, they've been okay. They've been satisfactory. But as you move inshore to the shallower water, to the greater degree of ledges and shoals and things, relying on virtual aids for that, I don't think that's the right way to go for some of these inshore aids. So I'm sorry to take up so much air in the room, Adam. If you have anything to add to that,
For my, it's a GPS is where you was. A radar is where you are. This is where it was. As that's taking data from the satellite, yeah, it might be 3-4 seconds. They're pretty fast nowadays. But a radar is where you are, and that's exactly where you are all the time. When I come up the bay on the ship, if I'm staring at a radar in the fog, I look at the buoys as reference points, not necessarily to always to see that I'm in safe water, but as you go by Vinyl Haven and North Haven by the thoroughfare, there's 5 buoys. It looks kind of like an hourglass on the radar, the buoys. I know when I see another mark on the radar within there, I know it's a boat. I don't need to see the trails. I go by Camden, I can see the buoys. I know those are buoys. If there's another extra mark, there's a boat. Those are the things. As you start eliminating it, it's going to throw things off, like which ones you're going to eliminate. I saw on social media, it would be like driving to Boston without any road signs. Could you get to 400 Commercial Street in Boston right now without a GPS, without road signs? You could do it in combination just fine. But if you didn't have a GPS or didn't have road signs, could you find 400 Commercial Street in Boston? That's the Coast Guard base in Boston, 400 Commercial Street. But it's it'd be a very hard time driving to downtown Boston without road signs. And That's what they're asking us to do. They're asking us to go up and down the bay without road signs. Because I can use my GPS, but sometimes when you don't see that south 95 or the south whatever street, commercial street, what it says on my GPS, but if you don't see a road sign for that, you don't know if you're even on it. So it's one of those things. I would ask that you write your local representatives, pressure them, pressure the Coast Guard.
What do you think the commercial fishing industry's opinion is?
I have my families, they're all lobstermen, and they are frustrated because they use the buoys as lines. You can't, like,
I mean,
I'll say-
territory?
yeah, I'll say guys fish right up to the PB buoy off of Rockland. And that lines up with like Drunken Lead or something like that. So they know that if the tide, the scope of the line, it's going to be a little bit of effect. But they've always used these buoys. You fish down to this. I don't know how Camden is, or where they share the line with Lincolnville, or where they share the line with Rockford or Rockland. It's one of the fishermen use those.
But they're using that more for territorial as opposed to just making sure their boat's in the right place and no one gets hurt.
Yeah, but like you said, like my father's, I don't know, 70 some years old, and he
Yeah.
still has like a 7-inch standard horizon plotter that has been out of date for 40 years. But he still uses it because that's what he's always used. And it would have none of this information that they're asking, because that data, that is not updated. Those old plotters, I can take this and turn it on to Wi-Fi and updates all the corrections right away.
I think there's a big part of that is not everybody out there is a professional mariner.
Yeah.
My dad has an old, and he can't see the phone in the glare. There's people learning to, it's not really, it's not fair to say, oh, the only people out there who are going to be able to navigate are professional mariners.
It's going to be
It's pretty limiting.
And he uses the buoys as sometimes, like, I don't know what the water is over there. There's a reason why there's a buoy there, because there is a ledge or a shallow spot. And it's like, I don't know what the spot. I think Steve was exactly right. There's more accidents now because I can I can
With the
I can
buoys.
go on the back side of that. There's space. I can cut in between there, and you can, but it's close. Where before you wouldn't do it at all because that's where the buoy was. Like, I am not going behind that. No. So yeah, I would ask that you write to your, it's not good. And it's like a death by 1,000 paper cuts. What's next? It's not to me political. It's just how the Coast Guard is. I love the Coast Guard, but I don't think they can act this quick from one administration to the next. Maybe it is, but.
Well, that's the reason I asked the question, because obviously with the Doge stuff, there was a lot of changes that were made to make changes fast by people who did not know what they were changing.
Yeah.
And that's what this reeks of.
It does, but I don't know that. I just can't give the Coast Guard that much credit. It's honestly, to do something.
They
that
could have
quick.
taken 2 years to do this.
Exactly. Yeah.
I thought that sounded similar to
Yeah,
a lot of
well,
the cuts that were being made. Yeah.
I mean, they're a great bunch of guys, like you say, like the boots on the ground guys, are really great bunch of guys. They work hard.
They're not doing this.
The guys we call them the black boats because they're the work boats. They're that's hard work, working on those buoy systems and taking all the buoys out.
Well, and you're going to lose that.
You're
You're going to lose that skill.
You're gonna lose
You
that
start
skill.
cutting. And these senior lifer Coast Guardsmen that are used to doing that work and know the ins and outs and are teaching the newer guys coming up, you're going to lose that skill set.
Exactly. And once it's gone, it's not coming back. Go find a guy that can drive a skidder or a ferry or something like that. They're gone.
I would add one more thing to your plate, somewhat related to this, and sorry to get off topic a little bit, but of as much concern for us, the pilots, as this Coast Guard effort is. I'm not sure if any of you are aware, but another government initiative that has just come down the pipe, literally in conjunction with this, is if any of you have ever used the data buoys, part of the Syracuse system. So the Syracuse system is not going to be cut back. It's going to be cut in its entirety.
Now, is this the weather buoy?
The weather buoys will be gone. The network,
Use
the
those all the time.
the
all the time.
entire network. They're not cutting back some of their buoys. They're gone. Miracoos won't
Because
exist.
nobody needs to know how much wind there is out there.
It's,
These
you
are
know,
the
and this is at a national level because NERACOOS stands for the New England Regional Association of Integrated Offshore Observing System. It used to be GOMOOS. It started locally with the University of
I
Maine.
remember that acronym.
GOMOOS, right? That was
Yeah.
so GOMOOS got absorbed into a more regional group called NERACOOS. And NERACOOS is part of a national group just called the IOOS, the Integrated Offshore Ocean Observing System. That's funded through the National Ocean Survey, which is part of NOAA. So this all comes down from the cuts to NOAA. It's just a trickle down cutting effect, but you've heard that cut, NOAA's budget has been cut. That's no secret. And that was political. That's been part of the new administration has severely cut NOAA. And so it's trickled down to NOS and then down to the IOOS system. The entire system will be gone. So I'm thinking for our company's letter to the congressional delegation, bringing the Coast Guard buoy issue up, I'm probably going to try and lump everything together because this is it's like a literal perfect storm.
But the weather,
That you won't
someone
know
was
about.
sitting here who did that, what would their justification be for cutting those?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, this is the buoy. These are the buoys that gather the data that the government uses as part of their calculations for observations, predictions, forecasting. I mean, I don't know. And the nice thing, I've actually had the pleasure of going down to Washington, D.C. about a decade ago. The University of Maine was always trying to get more funding. It's a grant. I mean, it was a grant related thing. But one of the things that I would tell the members of Congress or anybody that listened was the nice thing about the GOMOOS and then subsequently NERACOOS system was it was one of the few government funded things that truly was a multi-use project. Yeah, it was the science geeks that designed it and they wanted to know the plankton count and all kinds of stuff like that. But they're like, geez, would you guys like to know the wave period and the wave height? I'm like, heck yeah. So they added all that useful mariner data onto it, like, the pressure and the wave height, the wave direction, swell direction, all those things, which give us a tremendous amount of information and are a valuable tool for us. Even with our new boat down in Rockland, we're still kind of limited to 9, 10, 11 foot seas in, 8, 9, 10 second period. We're not going to go out in anything more than that. And so we really need to know, not only is that what's out there right now, but what's it going to be like in 4 hours? We've got people that are chartering ships for $40,000, $50,000 a day. They understand that there are going to be weather delays, but by the same token, they're like, can you at least give us an idea so we can plan our transit? When might we be able to get the job done? And these buoys have been a tremendous aid to commerce over the last,
Safety.
commerce and safety, safety considerations for commerce.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I'm kind of apoplectic, but it's like, that's a great question. Like what is the value of not having that information for mariners now?
And I'm just an ordinary guy, and I check that weather buoy, at least when I'm on the water season, but even out of season, almost daily.
I mean, the Owl's Head buoy has a lot of impact on Camden. As a mariner in this part, because we rely a lot on Monhegan, and we're out of Rockland, but the Owl's Head buoy is what we look at too. But the Owl's Head buoy is giving you wave direction and wave period coming this way, temperature and everything.
Wind speed
Wind speed on the water.
on the water. as
And a
opposed-
southwest wind in the
as
afternoon.
Correct me if I'm
opposed
wrong,
to
it
the
used to
airport.
give visibility, but I just checked that it didn't give it.
Its visibility has been strong.
I mean, really, it's a make and break if you're going to go out or not.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's,
Yeah.
I-
So these two things are happening literally at the same time. So I'm thinking that we're going to combine our comments to, I mean, at the very least, to get someone in the delegation to say, just stop. Ask that question. Go to the people that are proposing this, say, what's the advantage of removing all the data? What is that about? But that question has been
Don't
asked.
just say money.
Yeah, well,
Well, we know the answer to that question. We know it's we know it's about funding.
Yeah,
There's no mystery there,
yeah.
but
But the
But
congressional
exactly why
delegation
they think it
controls it.
doesn't, it's of, not of significant need is mind-boggling. But again. I
we're all
question-
gonna have our little pet buoys that we think we can't live without, like Steve's can number 7. He gotta have that. Well, if we're going to be asked to say, for instance, if there's a percentage that they're aiming at of buoys to eliminate, which will translate directly into how many dollars they're going to actually conserve. You know, how much energy is being expended to maintain X number of buoys versus 10% less.
Right.
So that translates into money savings. So if their approach were to come to local agencies, pilots, harbor committees, and say, okay, you've got to get rid of 10% of your buoys. That just is what it is. The noisemakers would be the last ones to go. Because that's what you're going to be dependent on when whatever screen you're using, whether it's your phone or your antiquated GP, which is basically just giving you a GPS location in reference to some landmass. A lot of those old GPS didn't have buoys on them because they didn't have the memory to keep all that. So you're now trying to find your way into Camden. It's been a long time since I had to stop and listen for a bell in order to find Camden. But that's grew up doing that. In some circumstances, well, for instance, none of the noisemakers make a noise unless there's a sea running. Gongs, bells, whistles. So what we had to do with Mary Day, it was where I grew up, was take the yawl boat out and make a turn around the boat and create a wake and make the bell ring. Okay, there it is. Because Camden's not a good place to run for in thick fog. You're trying to hear a noisemaker, but there's ledges right behind it. If you overshoot that noisemaker, you're not in a good space. So my father taught me to run for a place that doesn't terminate in a pile of rocks, something you can go by and it doesn't cause a shipwreck. But so given that we all have our pet, and we're all familiar with our locale, it's our front yard, we know it, and we're not terribly excited about eliminating aids to navigation that we rely on and have always relied on a daily basis. But are there some we could get by without? Absolutely. I mean, the fact that they're talking about getting rid of can number 1 off of Northeast Point, but they're going to leave can number 7. Can number 7 is completely surrounded by moorings. I mean, it's almost, we have created a situation where that can is almost not even accessible to the Coast Guard. They can't get a big buoy tender in there to tend that buoy. So, and it's surrounded, we've allowed our mooring field to encroach into our channel to such an extent, or into our harbor, and occupy the majority of our harbor. We don't have an anchorage per se. It's been totally occupied by moorings. So if we're going to do that, then we don't have much of a leg to stand on when it comes to arguing about maintaining all the buoys that are out there. Because we have created a situation that's denying the Coast Guard access
We had to
to
trade
the
them
maintenance of that
can for
mooring.
can.
Well, that's the point. They're going to get feedback from everybody out there. And the percentage of people that are so entirely dependent on these aids to navigation for our means of livelihood, whether it's fishing, commercial, traffic, it's very real to us, but it's not real to a voter in the Midwest.
Right, they're just looking at a number.
They're not familiar with it. If somebody tells them there's a way to save some federal tax money, then.
So
Yeah,
that
they'll
we've
just
been
say,
given
oh, they
farm
all have their
subsidies that we
phones,
don't
they could-
understand.
Exactly. But, and also like,
You can argue it from every direction. That's what makes
They
it
can't even
politics.
spell fog.
and the Coast Guard works in the system of the Coast Guard. And maybe some of you guys are Coast Guard veterans, but it's a different, in the Midwest, I can go up the Mississippi River with a tanker, just like we drive around here. You see the tankers coming up and down the bay, that'd be a small tanker in the Mississippi River. They'd kind of like give that to the new guy. And here, that's a big ship. But down there, that's tiny. But down there, you're allowed soft groundings.
Mhm.
It's calm, like, ooh, that was, you feel like, you're like, whoa, you don't even report it. You cannot do that around here. There's no such thing as a soft grounding around here. But down there, it's acceptable to the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard accepts soft groundings in the Mississippi River, the Gulf of Mexico area, because there really isn't any rock. So that same system, if you think about the buoys and the markers and all that down there, it's not as critical because that's okay to do. That's not okay up here. You couldn't do that with an 18-foot Boston whaler up here.
But-
You can't have a soft grounding anywhere around here.
We don't
I
have
think,
a lot of
I think all of
soft
us, I think we could all look at our buoy system and say, and acknowledge that, yeah, we probably don't need that one. I mean, I don't think I think it doesn't work in our favor to argue that there's no room for some effort to reduce cost.
But that's what they didn't do. If they'd had that
Right.
outreach and discussion, they could have gone along, and that point that you make about the buoys in Camden is a good one. But
Oh.
that's a common sense thing, but no one looked at that.
Yeah, I mean, and from my perspective, well, okay, they didn't say, for instance, they could talk to us about where, are there some buoys that you think maybe should be relocated to be more effective? Absolutely.
I mean, even with the buoys,
Why on
there's
earth
groundings.
doesn't the R.W. Bell of Camden Harbor entrance, the northeast entrance, why doesn't that line up with our channel?
Well, I mean,
I mean, you could set it over not even a quarter, well, a couple, maybe 100 yards or 200 yards at the most, and it would line up with the channel that we have established as our means of navigation in our harbor.
But do you mean lining up so that the three red buoys line up with the,
If you were running for that noisemaker, and all you had was.
oh, I'm
all you
looking, I was
have-
thinking you were talking about this one.
All you
Okay.
have is a watch and a compass. That's it, because everything else has gone blank. None of your screens are talking to you anymore, including your radar. Batteries are dead. Your compass is still operating because it's not dependent on electricity. You may need to have a flashlight to see it because you've lost all your power. At any rate, you're running for
Yeah.
that bell. Wouldn't it be nice to know that if I take a course from that bell past Northeast Point through the ledges, I'll be in the Camden Harbor Channel.
Right.
Once we get the channel fixed, once we get the channel back to where it's supposed to be, then all of that would be copacetic.
No, I was confusing which buoy you were talking
as
about.
a non,
That's a good idea.
I was on the airport committee in Owl's Head. Owl's Head Airport has 2 runways. The FAA is now only supporting, this has been over the last few years, they are only maintaining 1 runway. All the other maintenance on the shorter runway is done by just landing fees, Knox County money. It's not coming from federal grant money. So your ILS approach coming into Owl's Head is the long runway that goes over Route 73 and Ash Point, Dublin Road. The FAA will support that runway because they're seeing the traffic, but they're trying to cut back, so they're not supporting the other runway that a lot of the small planes use. You can't really land a big jet on it. And if I've been in and out of Camden on yachts. I come up to bring the kids up for pizza all the time on my boat out of Rockland, my personal boat. But I look at that Northeast Channel as a sketch. I like where that red and white buoy. I don't know why it's up there. I would not choose Northeast Channel as my entrance to Camden Harbor. I look at that as a mid-channel marker. That should be, to me, down by your number 2 buoy. But you're right. You're right about the 7 and the 1. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the reason that's out as far as it is so that you do end up with some space between you and the rocks. If you're
Yeah.
running for a noisemaker
Yeah,
and that noisemaker is backed up by a pile of rocks,
yeah.
you want to make sure you don't overshoot that noisemaker. You want to, it's critical that you don't lose track of your time over the bottom, your speed over the bottom, because you'll get there too soon. And
And you won't be able
if
to
it's
correct.
not making any noise, you'll overshoot it, and now you're on the rocks
Yeah, now you're
in
either
zero,
on Northeast Point or the ledges.
in zero visibility. Well, that's why I was told Camden's not a good place to run for in the fog. It's
Yeah.
not. It's this,
No,
there's good places, there's good places. It's like truck drivers. If you've got a choice to make.
Is
you
that
look for the-
CH buoy? Is
you're
that-
going off the road, or you've got a school bus and a brick wall.
Your choice.
A truck driver's gonna go for the brick wall.
Yeah.
So you don't aim for you're aiming for something that's going to reduce the impact on your
That no discharge
survivability.
zone that goes out to the CH buoy, that no discharge zone, is that CH buoy there because of the no discharge zone? Or is that no discharge there?
The no discharge came well after.
Well
the
after, I wanna say
CH.
that
So
came
they
in
just,
years
they're just picking,
around for a
they
long
picked
time.
that as, okay, let's use this as the mark.
That's why we anchored that LeGrand blue.
Yeah.
Up there.
Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that if we could, whatever we write to the powers that be, it should be some indication of a willingness on our part to say, okay, sure, there are buoys
We'll have to come to the table.
that we maybe don't need. And they're going to get response from Steve about number one, oh, I just can't live
Because that's
without,
how he approaches
I
it.
can't live without that. Well, I don't care about
I mean,
can
should
number
letters
one.
be
That's,
coming from the
that's-
community? Should we put something out for, I mean, as many people as flood them with?
Like a lot of political things, so much about it is numbers. So yeah, the more
I mean, if
people
we
that
put
write to the
something out-
Coast Guard and the congressional delegation and say, we have concerns about this.
I mean, I'm sure all the mooring holders down there would have something to say
Or the
about it.
Camden Yacht Club.
One of the
They have a lot
points-
of power.
I
Lyman
mean-
Morris has a lot of power.
One of the points that Steve made was we have more accidents now than ever before. Well, that doesn't help us argue in favor of keeping our noisemakers. That doesn't reinforce that argument. There's reasons there's more accidents than there have been before. There's more people out there that have absolutely no requirement to know how to operate. None. So if we really wanted to, we have Coast Guard Auxiliary, we have ways of educating people, and just giving them some basic understanding of rules of the road would be nice. It would-
Isn't there
would-
a
would
course
help,
that
Power
people have
Squadron.
to
Power
take now
Squadron
for-
offers.
yeah.
but there's no requirement.
I thought
No
there,
requirement. no.
that there's not a requirement yet? Okay.
No, there's no requirement. I mean, not even to the extent of getting a driver's license.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a practical exam and a written exam to get a driver's
I
license.
think we're actually one of the only developed maritime nations that doesn't have.
Probably.
I know all through Europe, you actually have
Yeah.
to have a license, even for recreational.
And I've posed this question I've posed
They
the
have
question to
licenses to
several
go on.
lawyers, like for instance, operating a motor vehicle is a privilege, which can be revoked.
Yeah.
Well, is operating a boat a privilege or is it a right? There's nothing to revoke.
Right. So how are you going to take it away?
You don't have a license where, as opposed to us licensed mariners, we have to prove that we're qualified to be out there. So I don't know, there's a lot of steps that could be taken to reduce the number of accidents that don't have anything to do with buoys.
Elliot, can you circulate the method of contacting these people?
Yes.
I gotta run.
The papers all reported it as they only want email.
That's of course what they want.
Yeah.
You're referring to Coast Guard contact?
Yeah, and then I can find that the delegation, which is where the real muscle comes.
Yeah, the Coast Guard,
I-
according to the
I think
reporting.
at the end of the day, what we would hope that the congressional delegation would put their thumb down on the Coast Guard is to go back to the drawing board and start having the meetings that would get information like you're talking
And the
about.
reason they haven't had those meetings, because they will get a headache up the yin yang of all the, this is my personal buoy. Well, I have this buoy, and then when they go home, they're trying to figure out what the F to do with all of this granular level detail.
Well, they'll have to listen, they'll have to decide who they're going to listen to. And they're going to have to make a common sense appraisal of
But I
what-
think
what
that-
was that guy's reason for wanting to keep that particular buoy?
I
It's
think
his
the
pet- it's
biggest
his
thing
pet
goes
buoy.
back to the basic philosophical thing. They think that everyone should have their head in the screen on every size boat, and
Yeah,
that's all that matters. And they don't understand that in the real world on the water, not everyone is either has a screen or is looking at a screen or thinks that that's the right way to spend their Sunday afternoon is staring at a screen. I mean, it's not all commercial use. It's just people that rely on the grid.
Right, well, then there's
Okay,
going
thank-
to, there's
thank
going to
you,
be
Bob.
that other aspect of them deciding on priorities, which is they're going to make distinctions between responses from recreational users, and they're going to hopefully make a distinction between that and commercial users.
yeah.
And they're going to have to make a distinction, draw a distinction between response from fishing commercial users and transportation commercial users.
Usually
Because
when
they
these
have
meetings,
entirely different priorities.
Right.
stakeholders are the big, that's what
I mean,
we're,
one of the ads,
these meetings.
I just Googled it this morning, is one of the things that came down was an interview that took place down in Casco Bay between an assistant harbor master and a local fisherman. And he said, it's really nice to be able to go up to a buoy and get the number off the buoy so I know where I am. Wow. I mean, if that's the level of competency that we're up against, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
And there's no wonder we're having a lot of accidents.
Yeah.
I mean, what the number is on the buoy, if you need to read the number in order to know which nun or which can you're sitting beside, you're lost already.
Already.
So, you know, that they're gonna have to wade up through a whole lot of responses that are just
Well, and
not worth even
those
listening
people
to.
aren't just going to go away because the buoys go away. I mean,
No, they're
an
not.
an inexperienced recreational boater isn't gonna,
We see it.
Yeah.
And the key part is that like the most important part is stakeholders. We each individually can say something, but as a larger body, the Coast Guard would be, I think they'd come to meetings and listen to everybody, but I don't think they would take, like you said, what Steve says versus what you say, or what, they're going to listen to larger bodies. Like you might listen to like the Power Squadron, different councils, different things. That's where the stakeholders as a group, you guys come together and say, this is how we feel as the Camden Harbor Committee. We are a stakeholder within our community. Instead of each individual person, maybe the Camden Yacht Club would come together and say, this is as a stakeholder, a water user, not each of us individually. I think you would have more,
I think-
less confusing.
Well, I think in order to attain some level of credibility with them,
Yeah.
them being whoever it is that's going to listen to what we have to say, they're going to be interested in what your credentials are.
Right.
If you don't have credentials, then they're going to be interested in your perspective. Without credentials or without experience, you really don't have much to say.
Right.
You really don't, you're not in a position to make a good judgment. If I was, they talk about the 30,000 foot view of the whole scenario, and you just had nothing else to do but take it section by section and go along, and I'd look at this and say, yeah, that noisemaker should line up with Camden's channel. That's just from 3,000 feet. I would say that would be the recommendation that I would make in our case. And I would also say, yep, you might as well take can number 7 away because we've surrounded it by moorings. So you can't even see it. You can't even see it on a bright day. It's hidden behind moorings from no matter what direction you're heading in Camden Harbor. You can only ever rarely catch a glimpse of that can. You might as well take it out. So unless we're willing, my point is, unless we're willing to make suggestions that that line up with the push to try to save money, then there again, we don't have the credibility that we'll need.
I think that it's important, as you said, to just kind of, instead of saying, this one's more important, this one's, to say, let's just kind of a lump sum, let's pause and look at this, because these are going to have repercussions, rather than, because they can't look at that and say, oh, well, this town thinks we should, they're going to say, wait, this.
That's what I think they
That's
ought
what-
to be doing, because that would give them the ability to go to each of these areas or groups and listen to input like Ron just had it, but which makes perfect sense. But I don't think that, I don't think anyone at the Coast Guard has ever looked at that chart and said, oh yeah, it would make more sense to line up that deep water buoy, the CH buoy with the channel. I'll bet you nobody in the Coast Guard.
Well, we know how it works, Dave, and we've personally known people who have operated those buoy tenders.
Yeah.
I mean, Bill Young operated the Shackle and the Whitefoot. So, I mean, it wasn't the Whitefoot, it was the
White Lupin?
White Lupin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's 50 years ago.
David,
And even if he were in a situation, he would look at it and he might be in a situation, say, we're putting this buoy in the wrong place. What we really should be putting it here. So he might have made a note in his log, and that might have gotten passed up the ladder.
Yeah.
But whether or not it got noticed up the ladder, or whether anyone up the ladder gave it the significance in priority that it deserved, because they're getting firsthand feedback. I mean, somebody sitting in an office in Washington is entirely dependent on that kind of firsthand feedback.
Yeah.
But if they're not going to listen to it, then what's the point? And so if they don't get it, if Bill Young doesn't get a response back from somebody in Boston Station or Washington, he's just going to give up. Why do I bother to try to make recommendations about how we could do this better
Right.
if they're not going to listen to what I have to say?
David, earlier you commented how relying on a single navigational reference here, and I'm using my own words, is contrary to seamanship training.
Right.
Could you elaborate on that a little?
It's a basic common sense. You don't want to rely on any one. You don't want to rely 100% on any one form of navigation. You want to verify. All right. Now, it's easy to say that. It's not always so easy to do it. When you're offshore, not near navigational hazards, you're going to be fine probably with a GPS fix, right? But as you come into a place like Penobscot Bay, you want to start using your radar. You want to start getting radar ranges. You want to verify your radar ranges with perhaps visual bearings on lighthouses or prominent geographic features. And then when you really get into the skinny water, Muscle Ridge or the approaches into Camden Harbor, you might have, if you're navigating in the fog, you might be looking at your plotter, you might be looking at your radar, but you still like to see those buoys as well when you come out of the fog. Not everybody has a reliable plotter or a cell phone that works. So you're just backing up one navigational input with another one. And that way you're not, if there's an error in your, let's not forget was it the Queen Elizabeth or the Queen Mary? Who had the grounding down there off of Nantucket?
It's Queen Mary.
Queen Mary,
Yeah.
GPS. They had a GPS fault. They were relying 100% on GPS fixes, and there was a short in their wire. Their GPS hadn't been updated in 6 or 8 hours, and the ship kept moving along, and they were looking at the GPS, and the GPS kept giving them a position, but it had switched to dead reckoning mode.
So they didn't know it wasn't
They
working.
didn't know. They didn't hear the alarm because it was buried back in the chart room, and it was a very faint alarm. They were relying 100% on that GPS fix. So that's why you don't want to rely 100% on any one form of navigation. If you have visual aids to back it up, it's
I've had captains
Sure.
tell me, hey, tell me when you see, as the deckhand, like they're looking at the radar, tell me when you see the lighthouse. In in the fog, it's
I mean,
really
so
important.
for us, I mean, I don't know about Adam, it's funny because we don't a lot of times have these conversations until things like this come up, but we're bringing in deep draft ships through Two Bush Channel. So I still like to go out on the Port Bridge wing and see,
It's my turn buoy.
yeah, I
When
mean,
I'm leaving that buoy, I know I turn.
I rely on that 5 TV. I rely on that buoy, even though I'm using my chart plotter.
But you're all, as I say, you're not just relying on the visual
Right.
of that buoy.
Right.
Because anyone
No.
who's taken a Coast Guard exam
Yeah,
understands that one of the questions you're likely to get on the Coast Guard exam is when is it appropriate to use an aid to navigation to determine your location? The correct answer is only when it can be verified by geographical sighting.
Yeah.
So there's a built-in disclaimer right there.
Right.
And
They want you
how
to use
many,
more than one way.
how many of us who have spent some time out there
Yeah.
have found buoys that were off station?
yeah.
Well,
In the river especially.
The WP buoy we were coming from the east up Matinicus. I brought a ship in from one of the Wagenborg ships from Sweden. Went by it on a stormy day, probably 8 to 10 foot seas. I went by it. I made my turn at the buoy. It's way down off Matinicus. Came up the bay. Then Skip sailed it. And he's like, "Where's the WP buoy? Didn't you report it?" I'm like, "What do you mean? It was there when I came in. It is gone. It's gone. It's AIS. It's on AIS. But the little buoy is gone." And this happened last fall, I think it was. And
I mean,
it has not been replaced, but at the same time, I don't dare to go near it because I don't know if it's 10 feet underwater or 10,000 miles away right now.
Well,
I don't know. And that's that thing is that buoy is, it's an important buoy. These buoys are important, like the 5 TV buoy and everything is.
We all have our stories about encounters with the Coast Guard and how they can sometimes be frustrating to deal with. But I've always said, and my elders always said, the guys that maintain these buoys, they do a really good job.
Yeah.
Good job.
They do a really good job. And the creation of the charts is beyond scrutiny.
Okay.
There are a few rocks that have been found by yachtsmen who were gunk holing, found a rock that wasn't on the chart. Okay, but when you look at the rock pile, which we refer to as the coast of Maine, there's only, you can literally count on one hand the number of rocks that are a hazard to your navigation if you're drawing 6 feet of water that you need to be, made aware of.
Right.
And what are the chances that you're going to go into that space in the first place? And use a good rule of thumb: go gunk holing when the tide's coming.
Yeah.
Don't go sneaking into places you're not familiar with when the tide's leaving you.
Does this channel see much commercial traffic?
That sees all the commercial traffic that comes and goes to Searsport. All of it, all the tankers, all the.
Not up here?
The channel to the east side of the bay is predominantly used for vessels going to or from Bucksport or Bangor, Brewer. So this is the most heavily used channel, the one that goes right by Camden.
Like he said, the Pilot Association was instrumental in having those channels established in the first place, so that it was partly to try to reduce conflict between ship traffic and lobster fishermen, because their gear was getting lost by being run over by ship traffic. At least that was their complaint. So they said, okay, well, we'll stick to this channel,
Right.
but it hasn't reduced the number of lobster pots that are in the channel.
It's just reduced, but it's just reduced the guys complaining about it because they know we're going to be there.
They know you'll
Yeah,
be there,
yeah.
right? But
So it worked out.
they still set just as
Oh,
many
yeah, I know.
buoys in the channel as they ever did.
Yeah.
The Green Mile, we call it.
Yeah.
The Stephen King book. Green Mile.
So I think there's an opportunity here for the Coast Guard. If enough people write and raise the point, but I'd still like to see the Coast Guard come back and undertake this as a long-term effort where they communicate with stakeholders in individual areas and get the input and the feedback from the locals. Because, and that might be a good approach for the town to take and something that, right, it might be a good approach for us to say there are opportunities for the government to save money on aids to navigation, but not what you've suggested.
Not the ones you're pointing
Not
out.
this way.
Right, not this way, and say if you would take the time to reach out to the local maritime community, you'd find that there are ways of reducing the labor costs on the Coast Guard. There are buoys that could be removed, replaced. But you need to have local knowledge tell you where those are. That can't be determined from Washington. It certainly
Right,
can't
but-
be determined from wherever this came from.
No, I think it's quite obvious based on our experience that they just went through here with a big magic marker and made check marks on buoys. I don't believe they actually took the time to examine each circumstance in each harbor or each circumstance in each ship channel to determine which buoy should be removed and which one should be left. I think they're baiting, trolling for
Yeah,
feedback.
yeah,
So you got to just give them the feedback
give them the feedback.
and give them. I think that when we write a letter, we can say, yeah, we have recommendations. I wouldn't enumerate them, but we have recommendations for buoys that could be discontinued. If the effort is to try to save money,
Yeah,
then they'll say that will bait them into wanting to come talk to us, as opposed to just blanketly saying, oh, this is all a bad idea.
yeah.
Give them good reason to have a conversation with you by saying, yeah, we have a couple of recommendations that we would like to make.
Okay, well, everyone has some strong feelings about this issue, and I think it's apparent that the committee should formulate a response to the Coast Guard, and as David has emphasized, to our congressional representatives also. Does everyone agree with that?
I'll write them a letter, yeah.
The Harbor Committee should take some action?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And, okay, so what do we want to say?
I think we should.
Can we create some bullet points here of content for what it is we want to communicate?
Well, I think we have.
Well, yeah, we've had a lot of talk here, but I want to try and organize it so
All
that
right.
a document can be prepared.
Well, I think from my perspective, one of the most important points that we can make is to establish credibility and establish that we are somebody that they should come talk to. And I think in order for us to do that, we need to demonstrate that we've given it careful consideration. And our careful consideration reveals that, yeah, we have some recommendations on buoys that could be removed.
I think that's a nice conclusion to say, we do have some ways, maybe you could save some money if that's what it's about.
Well, if they're trolling for our response, then here it is.
Right, but also in what I read, Elliot, we have, they're saying basically we don't need these because of screens, whatever you want to call it. But those can fail. So I think that's definitely a big point we would want to make, that, we don't have reliable,
Camden is made up of, the historical seafaring community of Camden is made up of a wide range of boaters. You have the multi-million-dollar yachts coming in and out, but you also, like you said, your daughter's little sailboat, rowboat. There's a wide range of,
Right.
there's a lot of antique boats that come in and out of here. I call them antique, wooden,
Vintage.
vintage. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not all big.
And they may not even like if I drove a Model T or a Model A, I wouldn't put my Apple CarPlay in it. You know what I mean? I wouldn't.
Right, so that's one of the good points. I don't know how to convey that, but
It's
that's,
like you just have such a wide range of boating. You may not have those on boats. You might not even have all those electronics or the ability to have those electronics on some of these boats here in Camden. You don't. And that's the beauty of the coast of Maine, whether it be over in Pulpit Harbor or Brooksville. There's some of these beautiful boats. They don't have any of that on there. They rely all on sight, all on visual navigation. And to have all that gone is critical to the infrastructure.
I
So,
think to establish, again, to establish credibility, somebody that they're going to want to listen to.
well, that's us as the harbor committee, right?
But just being a harbor committee doesn't mean that you necessarily have a significant amount of experience on the water. That's not a prerequisite to being a member of the harbor committee, at least not yet.
Well, the harbor
Those of us
committee
who have-
represents the community, and the community includes all the types.
Well, and hopefully the people who sit on the harbor committee have familiarity with the harbor. That's,
But in many communities, they do not.
in many communities, they don't
Well,
necessarily.
there's no,
And we've had.
Well, I
we've had
haven't had
circumstances-
as many hours on the water, but I own a business that relies on these to go out on the water. So I still
There
think
are
that's,
times-
I still think that's valuable,
exactly.
whether I'm on a slightly different, I wear a slightly different hat in my thinking, and you have a lot more experience on the water than me.
Well,
And
Part of what will lend credibility is that you're a license holder. Or your operator is a license holder.
yeah,
That will lend credibility from the perspective
right,
of the
yeah.
Coast Guard. But I also think that if we show that we demonstrate that we have the ability to see it from 3,000 feet, and we're not just focused on our own backyard and what our priorities are for our own backyard, we should look at it and say, what of our navigational aids would we be willing to get by without in order to demonstrate that we're willing to make a contribution to this effort to try to save money. I mean, people are gonna roll their eyes to hear me say this, but if you want to save money, stop painting the numbers on the buoys.
but then we have to put in the points why we think these should
No, I
stay
mean,
too.
The numbers on the buoys, if you need to see the number on the buoy, it's not going to help you. I mean, not to mention the fact that.
That
Unless-
would be a battle with the Coast Guard.
well, and that
That's the
chart-
conversation
when-
hopefully
when-
they would come back for us to have, I guess.
When was the last time that chart was updated?
83.
Yeah. So to think that you're going to go see the number
Right.
that's on that chart is going to correspond to the number that's on the buoy. I mean, very few numbers on the buoys on the coast of Maine have been changed. I'll admit
Well,
that.
if you look at that chart compared to my plotter here and his,
Yeah.
I was looking at during the meeting, those charts describe what that buoy is. At that chart, that
Right.
paper chart says gong, bell, whatnot. Our
Color,
plotters, I have to click on the buoy. I have to click on it. I have to
Yeah.
put information, I click on the buoy, and then it tells me what it is.
And like you say,
3
sometimes,
clicks.
sometimes
So
if
if I'm in
you,
the fog and I gotta go on a plotter and you're gonna do the old airplane way and hold onto the top, or you're bouncing along and you're pressing with your thumb, things like that, that takes away from your situational awareness. That paper chart right there is gold. It really is, you know?
Yeah.
And to know that that buoy is a gong or a bell or a light, or, you know, this does say that.
right,
but-
and illumination specifications.
Yeah, and it says it all on that paper chart. If those are gone, if those buoys are gone, and now there's a fake buoy on here.
A fake buoy.
Yeah, it really is. Fake.
Virtual.
Virtual.
well, you know,
That's fake.
back in the day when you were making a landfall on a yacht that might have had Loran A, or maybe it's got Loran C, but for the most part, you've been navigating from Bermuda or from the Caribbean on dead reckoning. And hopefully, maybe somewhere along the way, you might have gotten a noon sight.
Right.
But you make a landfall, try to space it out so that you're going to make that landfall in daylight hours, because you know you're running out of sea room. You're approaching the beach, and it would be good to know how far along your route you are.
I mean, the argument could be you drop your phone in the water. What if you go to change your sail and your phone goes in the water?
No, but even on commercial vessels, with all of the redundancy there is, you can still have a catastrophic failure
You do.
of electronics. We,
They do in the Middle East all the time.
Yeah.
We've had people in the Middle East and near Israel and the Eastern Mediterranean right now. A lot of times your GPS does not work.
well,
So I'd
then
say lack of the electronics or failure of electronics is a,
we're not,
or service in general, that even if you have them, they may not.
Would you guys go from the harbor committee to the, I'm looking ahead of you, would you go from the harbor committee and have your select board write it? Or would you have your town manager write it? Or would you write it as, because you're talking about like who has got skin in the game. You guys
Yeah.
have skin in the game. But who is the Coast Guard going to listen to? A harbor committee, select board, town manager? I'm just asking those questions, you know?
well, it wouldn't hurt to have whatever letter we write get signed by members of the select board and the town manager.
The harbor committee is advisory to the select board.
Okay.
So one way would be the harbor committee would prepare a document that would go to the select board for release by the select board.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's, given that we're a town committee, it would be appropriate for us to submit a letter
Which would just happen to,
With
would
our-
have to happen soon, right?
with our letterhead on
June
it
13th.
that wasn't approved by
I-
the select board.
You guys have June 13th is, I thought I saw June 30th. What was the official drop dead date on comment period for this?
I thought it was June 5th, but it might be further past.
I thought it was actually.
You
later.
still have
I'm
that,
panicking 'cause
my
of the fifth.
red line thing?
No, you have it, Elliot.
Do I?
Let's see if it's on. I mean, I think if we can get the more, the merrier to sign it. Yeah.
Wow, that's
Within
small.
each of those
Yeah.
descriptions there.
Requested, the red line paper says June 13th.
June 13th, all right.
Yeah, and I believe that's what it was in the newspaper also. Yep, deadline for comments is June 13th. So that's before our next meeting. So our document needs to go to the select board for their review prior to that.
They're taking public comments until June 13th.
Right.
And they are, according to this is a news report, so.
So that's the Coast Guard.
Right.
So maybe we can write it up and vote on it via email or something, Elliot.
Yeah, that's what we'll have to
Do
do.
that.
I don't know what happens with this at the Coast Guard level. Like, so if they've got a June 13th end period, there's obviously, and I don't know what it is, but there's obviously a process that the Coast Guard follows to digest the comments, and then they have to report on what they got for comments. So there's a process to this. And I'm just thinking out loud here that, you know, it's not going to happen right away on June 15th. The buoys are going to be gone. There's going to be a process that there's going to be an opportunity for the congressional delegation to have influence over. So I'm
It would be good to have our Coast Guard letter dated.
Right.
For the
I'm thinking, maybe it's important to get something. It might not have to be that detailed with all the bullet points that we've said, just opposing it and also stating a willingness to work with them on their goal. And then just that way you've got the comment in, and then maybe you write a more detailed one to your congressional delegation. That's what I'm thinking about maybe for us, is just to get something on record with the Coast Guard. But then when you go to the congressional delegation, really get down in the
Break down the
weeds.
reasons why.
Because they're the ones that have the representatives who you can, visit and speak with face to face and get them
The
to
money's in
understand.
Washington. It's just who gets it.
Yeah.
The money's all there. It's there every year. It's just who gets it in their pot. And that's what we're fighting for.
Well, I think it comes back to my point was that you're back to credibility, or what level of significance are they going to give to your opinion?
I
is-
think you raised an important point, Ron, that I hadn't thought about. And that is just, you don't just, I was saying, stop the process. But I agree with what you're saying. You don't want to say that you can't get rid of any buoys.
Yeah.
You can't say that, because that just,
I think I liked your wording, the willingness to look into what we can
Yeah.
do. I don't think we need to
there's,
put in our letter today, hey, get rid of this one. I
Right.
think,
right.
What
There should have
pointing
been
out?
a process. There should have been a process where points like Ron's and the conversation we had today should have been done. And it doesn't mean that there would have been a big kumbaya moment and everyone would agree. The Coast Guard's still going to cut. But at least they would have left a process like that being more knowledgeable about why they're going to cut certain buoys and why they shouldn't cut other buoys. But the proposal that they put out now has gotten no local input.
No, I don't think there's any, judging by the totality of their recommendations, I mean, and it's primarily, it appears to be focused on taking out noisemakers and lit buoys, which should be the last to go. And like I say, if we're gonna have to make severe cuts, then okay, let's just don't paint numbers on the buoys anymore. No, I mean, we think how much money we could, think how much money we could save if we
Elliot, I
just
can
stop
type
painting
if you
numbers on the
want.
buoys.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not
rough
suggesting
draft?
that's what we
Kind
should
of,
do,
but
but
we're
I'm
gonna
just,
need-
That'd be
we're not
great.
willing
Give
to
us-
put our foot
That'd give
forward
us
and
a
say,
starting point.
okay,
So what do
well,
we,
how about
what do we
this?
want
I mean,
for,
if we're in dire straits and we're trying to figure out whether we're gonna buy groceries
That's what I
or
tried to
pay
get.
the rent, then, all right, let's stop painting the numbers
Yeah.
on.
Okay, Liz has offered to prepare a rough draft.
but let's get some points down that we would like.
Okay, stop the process.
Oh, no, I don't
Pause
think, we're
And
not,
reevaluate.
they're gonna establish the process and it's already en route. I mean, it's here. We're just, all we can do is respond to how it's been approached by the powers that be. That's
Well,
all we can
I've heard
do.
David say multiple times today that that we need to stop this process as it exists now. And
If we say that, they're gonna
reconsider.
say, oh, let's take out the other ones
We're,
too.
we're not,
They
we're
need to
not,
allow for local input.
yeah, we don't appear to be very cooperative if we say we just want you to stop the process.
No,
I mean, we
we're
need to make-
asking for them to pause and get community maritime input. Or, so before you make these specific decisions.
Very good, Liz.
I mean, we,
Good.
because if we don't tell them to pause, then they're gonna say, oh, Ron, you have another buoy we can get rid of. That sounds good.
Okay,
I mean, if we have to say the ones you want to get rid of could have some significant navigational repercussions.
I think we understand why this has started. There's an effort afoot to try to save money at the federal level. So we get that. Okay, so, and this is how they've chosen to approach the issue.
So
Okay, that we get that too. We can't change how they've chosen to approach the issue.
But
All
don't we
we have-
want to do that? Don't we want to change that?
we want to influence them to change.
We want to influence how they choose to move forward from here. We can't go back and change what they've already done. We have no effect over
All
that.
right, well, I don't know if we're moving forward
They
here.
asked for input by June 13th, so they haven't moved forward,
Right.
correct? I mean, this is it says right here, proposed. So yes, it's in movement, but they're saying they'd like our input. So I think we should give it to them.
Exactly. Yeah, so stopping the process doesn't allow us with the opportunity to provide feedback. We need to continue the
We want
process.
to pause the process of removing the proposed buoys and open a conversation about what could be.
Right.
I think,
Okay, let's get beyond that. I think that's, doesn't need to be the focus right now. Do we want to address the buoys individually?
no.
Ron, I guess I'm not sure. Do you think that all the buoys can go?
Why would you think that? I haven't said anything that would indicate
know,
that I think
but-
all the buoys should go.
No, I don't think you would, but if we don't tell them not to get rid of them, then we're not, I mean,
I think what we're trying to do at this point is to get them to involve in a conversation with us at a local level. And in order to do that, we need to just infer in our letter that we have a willingness to talk to
I thought
them
you said that.
about ways that can save money.
So Elliot, just so I'm clear, and I think you're all on the same page. So when I said stop the process, on a more nuanced level, stop the process, meaning don't remove all these buoys. Don't move forward with
think
what,
first,
don't move
yes.
forward with what you've proposed until you reach out and get input from the local communities, the local maritime stakeholders.
My daughter's school
That's-
uses the word pause, and I really like that.
That's where
It's
Ron's suggestion comes in. He's right. This is a Coast Guard process. It's already underway. They've issued their directive, but now they need feedback and they need pressure saying, you've gone about this the wrong way. Let us help you achieve the goal you're trying to get to. You haven't sought local input. You haven't solicited input from local mariners about the value of these aids that you're proposing to remove. Until you do that, you shouldn't take any action.
Okay.
Does that agree with what?
Yeah, yeah.
This
and I
meeting
mean, I
is
think just to-
recorded.
I think just to
Good.
to boil it down, I think that
well, I was hoping we could.
we're taking issue with the removal of a couple of our buoys, but, oh, by the way, there is one that we could get by without. That's all I'm saying. And I think the process has already started, so all we can do is respond to that and make that recommendation. I mean, the point that I'm trying to get across is that we are hoping to attract their attention to come talk to us about, by making recommendations that we think we should keep the ones that you've designated, but there is one that you haven't put on your list that we think we could get by without.
Okay.
That's going to tempt them to come say, okay, well, which one was it?
I wish I brought my glasses here. What is their rationale for this?
Well, that gets back to the statement you read earlier. This is they consider this the greatest safety initiative, modernization of navigation. I mean, they had that whole purpose that you
Oh,
read.
the-
Yeah,
yeah.
that's their rationale. That's their mission.
Because everybody has their phone and nobody
Right.
needs to learn. Yeah.
They're kind of spinning it this way. And like I said, I think it's kind of cynical, calling it an advance in safety. There's nothing preventing a mariner from loading up a navionics on their cell phone right now.
And battery could.
But I'm saying that, but everything that they're saying is,
Right.
It's like, this isn't going to make it easier for people to start loading cell phone software. You can still do that right now. You can do it right now. But that's, wholesale removal of floating aids to navigation that have worked for, generations of mariners. How is that a safety enhancement?
Right.
Right.
There's probably a lot of mariners probably in our harbor with older boats who may not. Everybody's going to have to get a smart. I'm sure there's people with flip phones down there that can't do. It's just it's really. So I guess we need to figure out how to get this down with words.
Would you guys mind if we excused ourselves from this
Please.
part? Because this is your letter, your conversation, and I've got my phone pinging like crazy, probably with more buoy concerns. Crazy how it's.
We've been kind of involved
I haven't,
in this.
I haven't written our letter yet. We've had newspaper interviews and talked to these different groups, and everyone wants to talk about buoys. It's like, I got to get going on our letter.
All right. Well,
But this, I appreciate you involving us in your conversation. Because I think, quite frankly, Ron's opened my eyes a little bit. I think you got to be careful about saying no too much. And you need to say, geez, you didn't get our input on this. We understand what you're trying to do, but without the local input, it's really not going to achieve what you want to achieve. Because I think that's what's happening. I think that's what's
You
happening.
make up a point about the old boats. I mean, I've talked to Coast Guard inspectors, new from like Florida, they've been assigned to Marine Safety Belfast, and they go down on a schooner and they say, it's got a fireplace on board. Like that's unheard of. in
Mind
maritime.
blowing. Mind blowing.
And it's like, I can't believe that's legal. But if you look on the subchapter T requirements, they do have a little almost subsection that was made up for these boats around here.
Mm.
You know, it's like, there's probably schooners down there that don't have all the stuff that, say, if I ran a powerboat doing the same thing, carrying 12 or 15 people, that I'd be required to have building brand new. But since that schooner was built in 1882 carrying granite, they allow it not to have a radar. They allow it not to do this. They allow it not to do this. And it's just what it is. So if you're going to take away the buoys, you really handicap the historical meaning and some of that stuff. The system doesn't work both ways, you know. And I think if you sell that historical part of Camden, and Camden is where the boaters are. How many super yachts sit off here? They want to see Camden.
Yeah.
I'm thinking there's a lot of pretty places with a lot less people. I don't, you know, it's not a bad mouth in Camden, but it's like, it's a lot quieter elsewhere. Yeah.
I appreciate you guys coming in.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Good luck with your
Adam,
your efforts.
What is your last name?
Philbrook, Philbrook.
Phil Brook.
Yeah.
Got it. All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
And
Good luck with things.
David, G-E, I
GLINAS.
thought I see it, G-A, so written
No,
somewhere.
GELINAS.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you both.
All right. Thank you. We can do that. That'll have the proper.
Oh, great.
All right. Thanks again. Good luck with things.
See you guys.
All right, take care.
Good to see you, Dave.
Uh-huh, okay. All right. So don't say no too much. Say we'd like to
Provide feedback. I mean,
have a dialogue.
Yeah.
I don't know what came out with all of what we see on our little screens here. Coast Guard sent this notice out in some form or another to what, news agencies? I mean, that's how we've become aware of it, correct?
They did talk about it. My husband went to the Coast Guard passenger vessel or the commercial vessel day. And I mean, they discussed, they were made aware of it, but it was just that, you know, they were the inspectors. They weren't,
Probably in a local notice to mariners at some point.
yeah.
Mhm. Susan
Well,
Dorr
it's-
told me about it before I saw it in the newspaper.
Yep. Well, even the notice to mariners is not something that gets, well, they broadcast changes on 16 if they've made a change to a local aid to navigation, or if it's down for a period of time or being maintained, whatever, they tell you about that, or if there's a characteristic that's been changed. But that's something that you receive, like we got notice to mariners working for Moran in New York, and it fell on the first mate to update the charts. Based on that, you had to go through the notice to mariners and see if there was any changes that were implicated on the routes that your vessel normally is using. And if there were, then you had to make those changes on the charts. But as Dave points out, we're not even required to have charts anymore. The requirement is that you have two electronic devices that are plotters and have charts on them. And that they require two for the sake of redundancy. And
And
those-
one of those could be your smartphone.
Correct, yeah. And those, as Adam pointed out, are being updated automatically. As soon as you turn on your plotter on your vessel, provided you are within access to a cell phone connection, it will automatically update the charts that appear on your plotter to changes that have been made. So that update, that notice to mariners is being updated daily on the electronic devices. But it's not that they send out a newsletter. They did to Moran. I mean, we got a notice to mariners, I think it was bi-weekly, regarding aids to navigation. But that's a large commercial operation. But they don't necessarily send it out to us private individuals. So it's you know, say I don't know. I only know about this through news release.
Okay. Liz, I think we could define the situation here. The Coast Guard has has this proposal to make the changes.
Okay, let's see here. Who are we addressing this to? To,
I guess the select board.
is this something we can just have select board members sign if they agree with it? Or is that, I mean, it just has to kind of get out there.
Yeah, I think
Or does
we,
this have to go to a meeting and be, because this is,
I think for the sake of expediency, this is a letter that we should write and that we should get signatures on from select board, town manager, and harbor master. I think that's just so that we stay within the parameters of the government that we're operating under here as a committee.
Give them something to sign.
Yeah, I wouldn't saddle the town manager or the select board with writing a letter. I think we take that responsibility as a harbor committee. Being
we're just
involved.
getting the support of some, I don't know how that works with,
Well, there may be members on the harbor committee that choose, on the select board that choose not to sign
and
it.
I think that's okay. I mean, it doesn't have to be a unanimous, the select board agrees with it or not. We're getting a member of the select
recipient of
board.
the letter doesn't even know how
Right,
big the select board is.
right.
Well, and I don't think it rises to the level of something.
Right,
that
that's what I mean, that's what I mean.
That the select board needs to put it on their agenda.
Right, that's what I was
and-
wondering.
and
I
vote
don't
on
think
it.
so either.
No, because
I think Audra could look at this letter and say, you guys have talked about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sign it.
I think that's what our job should be.
Right. So this is to where's this coming from? The
To
U.S.
whom it
Coast
may
Guard?
concern.
To whom it may, well, I prefer to know whom it may concern. Does it say where we're sending?
They probably have some documentation on where to send this.
The Coast Guard First District Commander
Oh, yes, email can be sent to public
Seeks
comments.
public input.
Coast Guard First District Commander, that's who it's going
Where do
to.
you find that?
It's on this fine
Julia.
print.
Yeah.
This is off of the Coast Guard website. And I can't tell you what the URL is for this.
No, I don't. I was just wondering if that was something you got. So you got that off the Coast Guard website?
Yeah,
Okay.
I printed this off the website and I just printed the page for Camden Harbor. There was it listed all of the
rest of it
changes.
goes on to, was a total of 124 pages. I say, good. I'm not gonna,
Yeah.
I don't need to print all.
Yeah,
No, well, I think we can just assume that we're not the only ones who are taking exception to what this appears to be a proposal. I think they're not necessarily proposing in reality that they're going to remove all these buoys. I think they're looking for feedback, and they've just gone along and checked off a bunch of buoys and said, let's see what the response is.
to the First District Commander, subject, Coast Guard project, whatever that number is.
So this would be,
Well, if you have all of that off of a Coast Guard website, that's better than what I have, because all I have is news reporting. And it may or may not be correct.
Yeah.
So
Um,
definitely use what you got from the,
refer to project number 125, yeah.
dash 25 dash 015, and it's in this article here.
015.
Yeah,
Okay, I
so
can
now
put
you're,
that.
now you're back to using what I've got, which is just a news report.
Yeah, but somewhere
Yeah,
in
but it's
here
coming from the Coast Guard.
is the URL to, that's how I access this, I think. Maybe it's on
Well-
page A3.
If we're going to compose a letter, I think we should do that and worry about who it goes to.
Yeah, I was just getting in the project number.
Okay. I would start by saying we appreciate the effort.
Yes, that's what I'd like. I'd like sentences because
We had become informed of an effort on the part of the Coast Guard to reduce costs regarding aids to navigation. It's come to our attention, or we've been made aware.
we don't know if it's reducing cost. I mean, we assume that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a safe assumption to make. I mean, there isn't any other, they're not doing it because they're lazy.
I mean, I don't appreciate this as a way to reduce cost.
No, but what I'm saying is it's an effort on their part to reduce costs. We appreciate that that's what the effort is we recognize, or I don't know how you want to say it, but we understand.
Okay, here.
Second, we ready for another sentence?
Nope. 1 second. Oops. Okay, here. Ron, what did you want me to say here? We appreciate your efforts to reduce
Well, we understand. Somehow we acknowledge.
okay.
We
acknowledge.
We acknowledge that we understand that the underlying purpose here is to
And cost associated.
improve efficiency and reduce cost of maintenance.
I was gonna then say, however, let's see, we acknowledge
Yeah,
changes.
I would just let those sentences stand by themselves. This is only going to be 4 sentences or 3. So
We acknowledge your efforts to reduce USCG navigational aids and the costs and efforts associated with them. As representatives of the maritime community in Camden, Maine, we are concerned about the proposed removal of these aids in reference to project number, da, 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 da.
yeah,
And would,
well, the first sentence is it's
am I way off to other?
No, you're fine.
well, there's repeating of the reuses of words there is just Readability is very important.
Okay, would you like to write it, Ron? I'm not saying that to be rude. But I either need,
I would just say, we understand that from the Coast Guard's perspective, there is an effort. An effort is being made to reduce, improve efficiency and reduce cost. I just think we should keep it really simple, that we understand. First of all, it's come to our attention.
right, I said we acknowledge your efforts. But
Okay, all right.
I don't know how to make that more simple.
Mhm.
Without making it not, we acknowledge your efforts to reduce national aids, navigational aids, and the cost and efforts associated with them. That's too
Efforts.
wordy.
Efforts to, yeah, I think so. I think it's we acknowledge your effort to improve efficiency and reduce costs regarding aids to navigation.
Okay. We acknowledge your efforts to, say it again, reduce,
Improve efficiency and reduce
efficiency.
cost. Associated with aids to navigation.
okay.
The proposed buoy constellation changes are intended to support the navigational needs of the 21st century prudent mariner.
And where'd you read that from?
I'm
I
at
mean, who wrote that?
navsend.uscg.gov. I just searched for the
Oh, shoot.
Coast Guard First District
Okay,
buoy
here we go.
termination and came up with this link here. And I'm trying to find where I printed this stuff from. I haven't found that yet.
So we ready for sentence number 2? This is where the electronic.
And I'm not.
Do we not want to say we're concerned about the proposed removal without further conversation?
Well,
Nope, you can't leverage them in any way. We have no levers other than to, as I.
We can say we're concerned about the removal. Isn't that the whole point?
we don't like it.
I mean, we can absolutely, I don't know. I guess I'm not the best person to write this because that's what, to me, that's what we're doing. We're saying we're not telling them, hey, don't do this. We're saying, please listen first.
We've given, we've
Yeah.
given careful consideration to the proposal and are extremely concerned that some of the aids that are targeted by their proposal are significant to safe use of
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
our waterways. Well, I don't know.
We have sought and received input from local stakeholders.
Well, Ron, if our sentences are going to be exactly the same as you would write them, so we have to, I mean, we're kind of all saying the same thing, so we kind of have to.
But words are important.
Haven't we?
I consider myself a pretty good writer, so if it's not going to work, then I'm going to save this and have somebody else do it, because I can't do, I mean, I can try to do the best that I can here, and we can send it out and edit it if we
It's a
want.
collaborative effort, Liz. I'm not trying to be too critical
I
about what it is
absolute-
you've written. I'm just, you're reading back to me and then I'm saying, well, okay, well, we could write this too.
Okay, I
Or
guess
this would be my perspective.
that's okay. I
that's
just
all
feel
can
like
do.
my words are pretty similar to yours, but it's just slightly, okay. It's okay. We all have different ways that we write, obviously. We all have a different voice in our writing.
The Constellation changes are intended to support the navigational needs of the 21st century prudent mariner. And they've got a word, it says vice. I'm not understanding the word vice in this context. Those of the mid-20th century, in parentheses, pre-GPS, AIS, e-charts, mobile device apps, improved radar, etc. So they want to support the needs of the 21st century mariner, and not those living yet in the 20th century. Essentially is what they're saying here.
Yeah.
Deliver effective economical service, manage vessel transit risk to acceptable levels at acceptable cost. Well, that's interesting. Best maintain the most critical risk reducing buoys for the long term and provide resilience against A to N discrepancies, GNSS disruptions / ECS failures. Provide resilience against aids to navigation discrepancies, GNSS disruptions, ECS failures. What is GNSS disruptions? What is ECS?
Global Navigation
Global
Satellite
Network.
System.
GNSS,
Global navigate, provide
Satellite.
resilience against
Global Navigation Satellite.
disruptions, failures, and discrepancies to technology. I'll just lump that
Yes,
all in.
technology.
How does removing buoys provide resilience against technology
Seems like the
failures?
opposite, right?
It doesn't make sense to me. Am I not understanding?
No, I don't think you are understanding, Ellie. I don't think that we should just assume that because they've thrown this out there, they're just throwing spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks at this point. Some pieces are going to fall off, some are going to stick. It's just they're baiting us to respond. I mean, if they had truly taken a careful look at this, they wouldn't even consider removing the noisemakers. It just wouldn't even be on the agenda.
So what's an appropriate response to their issuing?
Just
such a-
acknowledge what their effort is, we acknowledge that their effort is to increase efficiency and reduce costs.
But we don't think this
We
is,
don't
but we
like
don't
it.
think this is the way they should do it, though.
We're telling them
I
we
mean,
don't like it.
I don't
The
personally.
idea here is to
I
respond.
understand, Elliot, you're not.
I-
We can't bog ourselves, we
But
can't.
Ron, that's why I told you earlier, it sounds like you agree with it, because we have to tell them we're not pleased with it. I'm not pleased with it. Are you pleased with it? I know what you're,
Obviously not, Liz. I mean,
well, I know, but we have to tell them that, right?
We're acknowledging what they want to do. Okay, yeah, we
we're
can do that.
acknowledging that what their effort is. So we're starting out with a
Which we've done. We acknowledge your efforts to reduce.
a tone of understanding and willingness to cooperate.
Okay, so
in
my
their
second
efforts.
sentence, which wasn't, I thought was okay, but it's okay if it needs to change. As representatives of the maritime community in Camden, Maine, we are concerned about the proposed removal of these aids without further conversation. Is there a better way to say we would? I mean, I think at some point in the,
That's fine.
okay, you told me before it wasn't fine. So, okay, let's move on.
No, I don't remember hearing that sentence before, Liz. So
Okay.
you just read, that's your second sentence.
That's my second sentence. So now, so we acknowledge your efforts. We don't like this. We want further conversation. So now what do we want to do? Do we want to have some points?
I don't think that just trying to move this forward without just blanketly saying, we don't like this.
I didn't. I said without further conversation.
Okay, but I just heard you say we don't like this. So anyway, all I'm
I
saying
didn't
is,
write that okay. My
Okay,
letter
all right.
says, project number, Coast Guard First District Commander, we acknowledge your efforts to reduce USCG navigational aids and the cost and efforts associated with them. As representatives of the maritime community in Camden, Maine, we are concerned about the proposed removal of these aids without further conversation. That's all I have.
yep, and I would add that just to bring in our willingness to cooperate with with what their apparent goal is.
Okay, can you give me a sentence that would be good?
After careful consideration, we have
Identified or?
identified local aids which might be candidates for removal.
I think we should acknowledge that the ones they have, I mean, I don't think that's fine, but
Yeah,
I'm not sure that's saying instead of the ones that they think. I don't know.
Somehow we
can
should
somebody-
point out that we're not happy with what they've said.
So, yeah. I mean, I would say after careful consideration, we've identified that the proposed buoys are significant aids to our, that they're very important.
are of significant value to our,
Yeah. We have let's start with that maybe before we go into what could be removed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We have identified, and this can all be, edited.
I would say, give ourselves some credit for having talked about it. We have to,
With community members, harbor,
Stakeholders.
well,
We have sought and received input from stakeholders. Have we done that? Is that right? Didn't we do that?
yeah,
These guys
I'm
here
writing,
today?
sorry.
The harbor master,
yeah, but
all of ourselves, but recreational boaters.
Consideration with-
But I don't think that, okay, we can leave that in there, that's fine, after careful
Well,
consideration.
I mean, it should be local mariners, stakeholders, professionals. I
Yes.
mean, all of those, right?
Right. Yes. And Pixley gave me a list of, I didn't even count them, a dozen or more local fishermen and their contact
Provide
information.
significant
And I haven't had
value
a chance to talk to any of them about it.
to our,
Well, that's not going to change our response either way. We've
but-
already thoroughly covered
I
that.
thought it would be interesting to hear what they have to say about it.
Well, we already know that based on the responses we've heard today, that we all have our pet buoys. We've all got our buoys that we rely on to help us in our day-to-day comings and goings, and those don't necessarily go very far beyond our own backyard.
value for the safety.
There's the bigger picture is what is best suitable to preserve what of the aids to navigation that are in our immediate area that have apparently been targeted. Which ones are most valuable to us and which ones could we live without? So that conversation is going to get tainted by the perspective of the local mariners who have their routine trip that they make, whether it's Steve going back and forth to Bear Island and depending entirely on being able to
We
find
have also.
can number one in order to know where Camden is just laughable. To take that, to put that in a priority over the noisemakers is just, okay, all right. So
Priority over what?
the noisemakers, the bells and the
Bells,
gongs.
the gongs, groaners.
And the lit buoys. I mean, there are numerous lit buoys, even going up the bay here that they're talking about eliminating. They're not just putting the light out, they're taking the buoy out. So I mean, that's what I'm referring to when I talk about the 3,000-foot perspective is that there's.
Okay, I'd like I want to ask you if I'm not understanding this. This is their document, proposed buoy constellation changes intended to provide resilience against, and I'll just summarize all of this as technology. Provide resilience against technology discrepancies, disruptions, failures.
Yeah,
I don't get it. How are you providing resilience?
When you're not, and when I hear that, I say, oh, okay, that's a good thing. They're acknowledging that buoys provide a service in the event that electronic resiliency
I
somehow
don't
fails
hear,
you.
I don't read that. I read that how you're reading it, that all we need is the electronics.
The
That's what I-
proposed buoy constellation changes are intended to provide resilience against technological failures.
It's a good thing. That's a good thing.
How
That's-
does
How does
removing
taking
it
out a buoy
isn't a physical?
provide resilience against the failure of
They're talking
technology?
about, when they say the constellation, they're talking about all those pinpoints, those lights that show up if you take a 3,000-foot perspective. They are focusing on the concept that the buoy system provides resiliency to the electronic.
No, they're saying they're changing it to provide resiliency. They're taking out the buoys to provide resiliency.
I don't think they say that. I don't think it
Well,
says.
what the
we're
fuck
taking-
does this mean?
I don't think they're saying.
Read the
we're-
sentence.
No, you just read the sentence and I didn't hear anything about we're taking the buoys out.
What are the constellation changes referred to? Buoy constellation changes,
That would be taking them out, which
That's
is
the-
what they're
termination of buoys. These are the changes.
No, I hear it as, I hear it as what their goal is.
So it says, yeah, their goal,
You know, we can argue this.
it's
every
right
time.
sizing the buoy constellation whose designs predate the navigation system. So it's saying these buoys were put here before we had GPS. So now we don't need them. But you're right, that sentence is contrary, it seems. Right, Elliot? It's contrary. It's saying we're taking it out so that,
But they don't say we're taking these buoys out.
but that's the global constellation,
The
that's the,
proposed buoy constellation changes. what
that's
does
the
that mean?
changes are taking them out.
The changes they're talking about. The list, these are the changes.
Right, Elliot, but you're looking at this as if they have given careful consideration to each and every one of these buoy removals.
let's see
They
here.
haven't. We know they haven't. That's a Herculean task and we know they haven't done that.
But they're saying this is their justification.
No, they're referring to the constellation of buoys. They're referring to all the buoys out there. And they're-
Changes,
Yeah,
proposed changes
Yeah.
are intended to provide resilience.
Yeah.
How does removing a buoy provide resilience?
in most particular cases, Elliot, they probably don't. But we're not looking at them, they're not going to take out, I can guarantee you, they're not going to remove all the buoys that they have put little flags on. They haven't given those all consideration. I think that's why the response is so dramatic, is that we're saying, wait a minute, you can't take my buoy out. It's obvious that there are buoys that are used day in, day out, night in, night out by the professional mariners that come and go from this bay, other than fishermen, that are critical to their successful navigation, add to their successful navigation.
Okay,
I don't just make the assumption that that they're gonna take out all the buoys and put little flags on them. I just don't think that that's what their intent is.
Well, they're not gonna take them out and put anything there, right?
What's your question?
What do you mean, put little flags there? You
No,
mean,
they've flagged them on the chart.
Oh, on the-
They've put flags on them on the chart.
all right,
All I'm saying is they've shown us which ones they intend to remove. A little electronic blip on it, that's all.
I'm not sure we're gonna be able to get this written. It might be better for somebody to write it and get it back for feedback. Cause yeah, maybe I'm not the best person to write this. My writing tends to be, I like it to be a little more personal. That's, I think giving a voice is important. So if that's not what we're going for, maybe somebody else should write. So I have, after careful consideration with stakeholders, and then I have in parentheses, we could add whoever we want, harbor master, local mariners, professional captains. We have identified the proposed aids to be removed, provide crucial value for the safety of our waters. We've also identified alternative aids that may be less significant in our harbor that might be candidates for removal.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I mean, it just shows the willingness to cooperate and it.
Yeah.
and it-
Okay. Yeah.
They're trolling us by saying they're gonna get rid of the noisemakers. Okay, well, we'll troll you by saying, let's, maybe we've,
Talk about this. a
maybe
little
we've
more.
Yeah,
got some,
okay,
maybe we've
so-
got some recommendations.
So
we can
we've said that these are crucial.
Yeah.
And
That's
we've,
why-
okay.
That's why we can't just blanketly say, we want to stop this
We're-
process. No, we want to be involved in this process. We don't want to stop it. We can't. It's
It's already going.
it's a steamroller, and all we can do is hope to maybe alter its course a little bit with our feeble little voices.
Okay, what would somebody like to say next?
I don't think it needs to be any longer than that.
We're not going to say anything about technology failures and historical vessels. And
I think it would be appropriate to do that.
I think giving some perspective is important. I mean, I don't think it should be pages and pages long, but
I think David's point about not relying on a sole navigational reference is sensible.
Well, that's just,
Hmm?
yeah, that's just common due diligence in the marine industry as a professional mariner. I mean,
yeah,
that's
but they're
just-
taking that away.
It goes without saying. Well, but as I pointed out, and I don't know whether that didn't get across, but when you take a Coast Guard license exam, one of the questions is, when should you rely on an aid to navigation to determine your position? The correct answer is only when it can be verified
Right.
by a geographical site.
That should be that. And that's the point we want to make in our letter.
Oh,
right?
You're not hearing the answer. The answer is only
Right.
when your location can be verified by a geographical
Right.
sighting.
That's why we're saying these geographical sightings are very important
Geographical sighting has absolutely nothing to do with the buoy.
with the buoys. So you're,
They're disclaiming any responsibility for that buoy being in the location that is designated on the chart.
oh, so when you're saying geographical, you're not meaning
It's not the buoy, it's
Not a
a
buoy.
geographical sighting.
a landmark.
Exactly. Yeah.
Uh,
This buoy is where it belongs because when I line up Curtis Island with the tip of LaSalle, it shows up right where it's supposed to be. Okay, that must be where I am then. And this buoy must be in the correct place. They're not guaranteeing.
Right, I
to
know. I
any
just think
extent-
it's important for us as people on the coast of Maine, giving them a perspective that if you're in the fog, you don't see that geographical sighting. You're looking for a buoy.
I'm just trying to add to the conversation
Yeah.
about what Elliot brought up,
Yeah.
which was he's taking Dave Jelinas's advice that you don't rely on one source of
Absolutely.
information in order to determine your location. You rely on multiple sources in case one of them is not correct or is malfunctioning. That's
I-
that's Dave's point, and that's just due diligence. That's all that is. It's just there's no
Right,
There's
but
nothing. There's
I think
nothing.
that's the point for the Coast Guard is that if we don't have, if this GPS they want us to rely on fails, we need something else. And I know you're saying that you have to be able to,
The Coast Guard just doesn't see it that way. And,
Okay.
and they go, not only
Right.
do they not see it that way, they take it to the extent that they put it on the questions for a Coast Guard license exam.
I understand, so that, but is, so,
I'm not trying to justify what it is they do. I'm just trying to
that doesn't mean
explain,
we don't fight it or.
I'm trying
don't
to
question
explain their perspective. That's all.
it. Okay.
It says, when responding to this proposal, please include size and type of your vessel, recreational or commercial, how you use the signal to navigate, and distance at which you start looking for and utilizing it.
This is just, it's just more Coast Guard. It's the same perspective that we've been dealing with for the last, going on 70 years now. You don't want to get me started on that. It's just, you just have to understand that their perspective is not based on that from an experienced mariner. They are not necessarily, there are a lot of members in the Coast Guard who are extremely experienced mariners and helicopter pilots. I mean, I'm not trying to discredit the ability and the professional capability of the Coast Guard. In fact, I earlier pointed out that myself and my ancestors have always complimented the Coast Guard on its ability to maintain our aids to navigation. They do a so close to perfect job that it is just beyond any scrutiny. It's just by far as good as it can possibly get. But there are other aspects of the Coast Guard that are difficult to deal with, i.e. inspections on old schooners or requirements that they put forward for passenger vessels that you just go, you look at it, what was the thinking behind that? And how far are they going to go with this?
Would it be appropriate to address the individual buoys that are proposed to be terminated and cite the importance?
I think that's what they want. To me, it sounds like they want our feedback. I think it would be important to give feedback. I mean, they may have their ways of doing things, but I think it's our job to say our concerns. Isn't that the point? Otherwise, we wouldn't be writing a letter.
I think that's gonna get too much in the weeds. And we'll have to get into the discussion of whether Steve's Can 1 or Bell's CH is more.
Well, we've
important.
said we've found them crucial. I mean, I think, as he said, hopefully that what we want them to do is come have a conversation with this.
Okay, well then we can make a general statement and identify the buoys just as they have in these sections here and state their use and importance to navigation, local navigation.
I think we've already said that the aids to navigation that are in our immediate, I mean, I don't know that we have referred to it as our immediate vicinity. I mean, I guess they're leaving it up to that they're going to make the assumption that we're really only concerned with the buoys that are right here in our front yard. I don't think that's the case. I think that there's plenty of other buoys that other of us use regularly that get outside of our own front yard. So,
Okay, well, they have,
Yeah, and I think if we start getting a little far removed here, you know, then we gotta comment on the Rockport bell that they want to get rid of.
Right,
And
well,
is
so-
there-
I mean, you're right.
Where
The
do-
point
where do
is,
you
it's
stop?
not just ours. We're not just staying in Camden. It's,
no, so by requesting specifics about a particular mark that we might take issue with that's slated for removal, they're looking for local feedback. So I think that's what they really want is local
I
feedback.
think they want feedback that, hey, we see, we use these. Hey, yeah, just these are important to us, rather than not hearing anything that nobody uses them and they can go.
So that term local is going to change depending on who they're hearing from. They're hearing from a Penobscot Bay pilot. That term local refers to all of Penobscot Bay, including its approaches and all the way to Bangor. That's their local use of this area, not just one individual going from Bear Island to Camden.
well, then we can refer to the Camden Harbor changes, just as they have in their document. Camden Harbor. 3 buoys.
Or just the immediate location of Camden. I mean, some of the buoys are outside the harbor, but anyway.
We can't really speak to
I think for us, we're speaking for Camden Harbor.
Bronx River or Buzzards Bay.
Propose removal of these aids in Camden Harbor without further conversation.
And for Lincolnville or Rockport, you gotta go much deeper into that 124-page document thing.
I mean, you might put in something about, because you've already used the term, not authorities, but
Stakeholders.
stakeholders. The values inferred by those stakeholders as to how important these marks are to them.
We could link that in as a community of mariners. These aids provide reliable. I mean, I already used value, but I mean, that's really it. They're valuable. Reliable.
I think it's critical, not just valuable, critical.
These aids provide reliable,
Well,
provide a reliable and um, I mean, really to date, I don't know how to say it, but it's like day-to-day day-to-day, I mean,
well, that's why I
operations,
would
really.
use,
Yeah.
I get in trouble if I get too picky about it, but I would use,
These aids
they provide, they are critical to not just, they're not just reliable, they're critical.
Yep.
It takes it a step further. It's just a little more powerful to say they are critical to the safe, successful use of our waterways.
on a daily basis. That's what I really wanted to say. Okay, let's see.
Liz, have you defined the users? What exactly are local stakeholder, who they
I put in
are?
parentheses, harbor master, local mariners, professional captains. The list can go on.
Well, I'm
Include fishermen.
I'm
we can get any
thinking
more specific.
recreational
Recreational, yep,
and fishermen.
yep. Commercial and recreational fishermen.
Mhm. Commercial passenger vessels.
Yep. Harbor master, local mariner.
Be hard for her to skip that one.
I can make this a little less clunky, but I'll just put them all in for now.
Identify who our users are in our harbor.
Yeah, I would shy away, just personally, if it was up to me, I would shy away from making it too wordy. It needs to be easy to read, not a whole lot of verbiage. I think my pet point that I'm going to continue to try to push forward is that we've given it enough consideration that we've actually recognized that there's perhaps some aids to navigation that we really don't need
Yep.
anymore.
That's in there at the end.
I understand. And so if it's in a significant location with all this other verbiage, then I'm okay with that. But I think that's a point that we need to get across, because I think that's a point that will attract their attention and make them want to come ask us questions. Oh, like which one? And that will inspire a conversation with us. And will probably help to set us apart from all of the other feedback that they'll be getting from all up and down the coast.
You mean that, don't get rid of my favorite buoy?
I think it's important to
Water.
show too
Right.
that we have a robust use of the harbor too, that it's not
Yes,
just a
it's
bunch
not-
of
it's not
local
just-
fishermen who
yeah.
know exactly where they are. We have youth sailors, we have recreational boaters, we have,
Yes.
what would you, I mean, we're not gonna, what would we call the schooners? I mean, they're not even under power,
Yeah, right.
windjammers, obviously, I mean,
In my experience, you have to be careful what you initiate in conversation with the Coast Guard, because a lot of the things that we just take for granted, they are
They're clueless.
completely unaware of. I mean, Adam pointed it out, his conversation with
yeah,
with an inspector in Bangor. He said, "We got open fire on the boat? Were you kidding me?" Well, I mean, there was a time when almost every yacht had a fireplace in it, but that's just outside of their context. They just don't know
well,
how to deal with it.
I don't know what to do here. I don't know how. Would you like me to forward what I have to you, Elliot, and you can perk it up? Because I feel like I'm being told to be wordy, but not wordy.
Forward it to
Okay.
all members if you
Yeah,
would.
that would be short.
And have we mentioned the fact that not all
Nope.
navigators have this technology that they are
Well, no, that's
citing?
kind of what I was kind of getting at, the diverse population of boaters that we have, which could be in a separate sentence. So I don't have to I'm not going to put all this in parentheses. So that could be kind of at the end here.
I think it's important because that's a premise.
That's the premise of why we don't like it. Yeah,
Well, it's their premise is 21st century technology.
right.
Well,
Not everybody has 21st century technology.
yes, not everyone
Well,
has that.
Even if we disagree on their intent in that communique, we just see it differently or hear it differently. Even if even if their intent is what you believe it to be, Elliot, it helps us to see it from the flip side, so that we engender a spirit of cooperation, that we are not here to fight them. We're here to try to get them to come talk to us. I think that's the goal I think that should be the goal of our letter, because they're going to get a lot of letters that are just nothing but complaining. And so I think it's important that we communicate how important these aids to navigation are to us as mariners, and that we've given it careful consideration, and we've identified some potential buoys that we might be able to get by without.
Which one?
I already said this, the can off Curtis Island. I've said that several times. It's the
Yeah,
buoy number
okay.
7. It's completely
Well,
surrounded.
just because the mooring field has surrounded it, why is it there? Why is it there? Why was it
It's-
placed there?
It's there because it was marking a ledge that if you weren't aware of the ledge's existence, you might hit it. It's there for all the same reasons that a lot of these other buoys are there. They're there to mark ledges, or places where there's, not as much water as there is everywhere else. The reasoning behind the placement of all of these buoys is individual, based on each buoy. So likewise, the conversation, the rationale behind their removal should be individual, based on each buoy.
So we should take it away.
And the aids.
Well, the point is that it's no longer serving as an aid to navigation, because it's completely surrounded by, you can't see it.
But it has a purpose. And it had a purpose when it was placed.
It did have a purpose.
It did have a purpose, but we've negated it.
Changes in the usage of the harbor have caused it to be unnecessary.
One of the things that you will understand when you spend a lot of time out there is that, for instance, here in Maine, I mean, there are some heads up that you can get from just things that you wouldn't necessarily think of as aids to navigation, but the pot buoys themselves are aids to navigation. They give you a good indication of what the current is doing. And if you're all of a sudden in a spot where there's no lobster buoys, you might want to look on your chart and make sure you're not where you should be.
You might want to look over the side of the boat.
Yeah, because if there's no buoys there, that means that it's too shallow for the lobstermen to get in there. So the fact that area is surrounded by moorings, and then when you go into that area and you say, oops, wait a minute, there's no moorings over there. I bet there's a reason why there's no moorings over there. But that requires having situational awareness, which is
So the
unique.
hazard still exists.
Yes, the hazard still
The
exists.
ledges haven't moved, but how much of there is, okay, here's one way to look at it. If there's no, you could argue that there's no navigation actually taking place in that area anymore. It's a mooring field.
Because of the moorings.
It's a mooring field. You're in a mooring field. You're not navigating across the bay and concerned about identifying the location of a ledge, which you could determine with fair certainty by the buoy that's located on it. It's all an academic conversation, Elliot. There's nothing to be concretely determined about any of this. Each buoy is going to have to be discussed on its own merits. But
I'm not sure we're just kind of throwing this out there that whether our sentences are perfect, whether we add everything or nothing, I'm not sure it's going to discredit us completely. I think I think that would be different if they didn't ask for feedback and they've literally asked us for feedback. You can say they don't want it and they're going to do it anyway, but they have, I think we don't need to go into depth of everything, but that they did ask for our feedback. So I can't imagine they're just going to throw it in the shredder if there's an extra sentence or two.
well, this is some ensign that's going to be reading this anyway. He's going to read through all the emails that get received, thousands, tens of thousands of emails that come back in response to this proposal.
So I imagine that might flag the pause and further conversation. To be honest, I'm not sure anything specific we say is going to give them a
The only thing
aha moment,
the only thing I've come up with is our willingness to
Yep.
make recommendations on which aids might might possibly be of no value anymore. That's the only,
Right.
there may be other ways that we can try to attract their attention and get them to come give us, specific recognition. And in the process of that conversation, we might even be able to get them to leave the noisemakers.
I guess, I guess I look at our letter differently. I guess the way I look at it is a bit more of a, I absolutely understand what you mean, kind of throwing that out there to say, hey, we have an idea, but was more what he said. I mean, we think these are pretty important. It's a little more, we've said they're crucial, they're critical. So I think it's,
To the guy that's going to be reading it, that's just more of stating the obvious. That's what they're going to be hearing from everybody. I'm not saying it shouldn't be in there. I'm just saying that it doesn't set us apart. Don't get me wrong. Just because I'm pointing out the truth of the reality of the situation, which is that some ensign's going to be sifting through these tens of thousands of responses, and he's going to be picking out, or she is going to be picking out a percentage of those responses to forward up the ladder. So all I'm looking for is a way to get that ensign to send our response up the ladder. That's all I'm trying to do. I gotta move on.
Me too.
So I think,
All right, Liz. Well, thank you, Liz, for,
I'll just forward what I have. I mean, I'm going to stay and get I guess I'll just forward this. I won't be able to do much more on it once I leave this room. So we've,
Does this room have that affected?
no, it's children's activities and
Yeah.
end of
Oh.
school and beginning of season, and it's a lot. So, but I'm happy for any edits, but I will just put down what, and yeah, feel free to edit. I'm more of
how many words,
descriptive writer. So yes, if it's,
how many
complete.
words do you have?
I don't know. And I edit, I put things in and take them out. So I don't know how many words I have. Is that easily found? I don't have too much.
No, that's not very many at all.
well, I think that should be part of the goal, is to keep it short and sweet and to the point. I
You
don't
don't
think,
need a 5-page diatribe.
no, I think it would be a mistake to go into any sort of an evaluation of each and every buoy and all of that. I mean, that's what they're asking for. But our perspective is not from that of an individual operator. Our perspective is that as a representative of a community as a whole. So I think they'll understand why we don't tell them when we start looking for a certain buoy.
So we're going to send this to the select board, is that correct? That the goal, and the town manager for their consideration?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think what we want is their signature on it so that it lends credibility to the letter.
Probably should include the harbor master as a
Yeah.
official of
Yes.
the town of Camden in some form.
Okay.
You guys don't have to stay. That's okay. I'll send this
Well,
off.
that's all right. We're here.
So it's to be sent by email, so I guess, who would be the sender?
Probably Audra.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Janice.
One could probably make an argument for Susan Dorr, but I think the town manager is a perfectly appropriate.
Okay. On an entirely different subject, you recall Jeremy told us that we would have a peer application to review, and that didn't materialize.
Yeah, I don't think it requires an application, but maybe.
Well, I went to him a couple of weeks ago and asked him what the status of that was, and he said that there were some issues about that pier. And he didn't talk at length, but he inferred that there may have been a code issue.
Did the code change, or did we just or did something get
Well,
overlooked in the original?
Well, it could have been that it was overlooked, but I happened to look at this particular pier back a couple of years ago. And I was in my dinghy, I was cruising along the shoreline along there. And I noticed its proximity to the next pier down. And I thought, that doesn't look like 300 feet. And it isn't 300 feet, it's 164 feet, depending on where you measure point to point. But it's way out of conformance with the code.
That's, so it's either grandfathered or it isn't. I mean, does it pre-exist the code or?
Well,
What's the question?
apparently, the pier was maybe 10, 12 years old.
Yeah, it's, I remember it coming through the harbor committee at some point in time.
Really?
Yeah.
How'd they get under 300 foot?
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, right.
Um,
So anyway,
Administrative oversight
Yeah. Um,
happens every day.
And was, and which one came first?
right. Okay, so did each of you get the harbor finance?
Yes.
Okay. Something we can talk about another time, but just for your reference here. Some historical data. Liz, shall we adjourn?
Sure.
Okay. Officially adjourned. That took a long time.
And slide into their little charging station.
Oh, yeah.
She must have been watching one of the cameras, so she knew that.
She didn't want to hear us anymore. She muted us and left the room.